QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Reports. Print, save as PDF, and export to Excel. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. We are in our Get Great Guitars practice file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the View dropdown, selecting the Open Windows list. We're thinking about how we can print the reports and organize the reports now to provide them to somebody else often being such as a client or such as a supervisor. We will often be providing those reports in a digital format these days as opposed to basically printing them out and stapling them, and we often will have to be emailing those reports. So how can we do that task as nicely as possible? And notice, of course, presentation counts when you're dealing with customers and you're dealing with supervisors as well. So how can we put it together so it's presented as nicely as possible? Let's first start off by making a file that we're going to put this in. We've got our practice file we set up in the past, GGG data files. I'm going to go into that and I'm going to assume or pretend like this is our client folder. If it was a client folder, then and you have multiple clients and you're a bookkeeper or something, you might have multiple files here that you would be saving your information into. If you're just providing this information to your tax preparer at the end of the year or something like that, again, similar process that you might be going through. So then we have our section reports. Now we have our files in here. We got the section 1 reports. Let's go ahead and modify this. I'm gonna right click on this and rename it. And I'm gonna say section 1. I'm gonna say this is gonna be section 1 through 5 in our practice problem. And then section 6, when we start looking at presentations that start with a 6 number, that's gonna be when we start a new file. So we'll put all of our reports in here. We're going to be practicing or concentrating on the balance sheet reports, but we'll start to compile a lot of reports when going on to the income statement next time. So within this folder, then, we're going to be putting our reports together. We're thinking about how we can group them in a couple different ways. 1, we can save them as PDF files. 2, we can export them as an Excel file, which can be nice because we can also use that Excel file to group all of our reports into one PDF file with the use of Excel and a PDF printer. So watch to the end so you can basically finish that one or think about that process. I think it's really useful to do so. So I'm going to open up QuickBooks again, and we're going to think about the reports we generated last time. You could do this with any report, but the reports we generated last time are in our report center. So I'm going to go to the reports dropdown. I'm going to go to the report center. And I want to take a look at the memorized reports. So the second tab over here, our memorized reports, we can pretend now it's the end of the month now. End of the month, we're going to be providing, all we have are our balance sheet reports that we're going to be putting together. We'll move on to the income statement next time. And we have the standard balance sheet that we want. We've got the summary balance sheet, and we have a comparative balance sheet for a 2-month comparison. So we want to put all these together in one folder and basically email or imagine emailing them out to a client or a supervisor or our tax professional. So let's open up the balance sheet first. So I'm going to open up the balance sheet. And there it is. I'm just going to change the date to the end of the time period. We're looking at the 2-month ended time period, January and February. So this report is just going to be run for the end of February 02/28/21. There we have it. It's all formatted for us because we formatted it before and then memorized it. All we have to do is change the date. Now, when we save it, I can save it as a print item up top and save it as a PDF, or we can email it directly from QuickBooks. It can be a problem to email it, however, here because, you have to have multiple emails. It can be a little bit more difficult to attach multiple reports. And we have 3 reports here, and oftentimes you have more than 3 reports. So you might want to save it as a PDF first and then attach it to one email, basically, is what I would typically do. And then we have Excel. We can export it to Excel. Now, we can provide the report to somebody else in Excel, but we can also use Excel to take these 3 reports we're going to make and put them into one PDF file without having like a PDF editor tool, like an Adobe Writer tool, in order to do that. So we'll practice that in Excel as well. Really good skill to know how to export to Excel because you can manipulate the reports in Excel or you can adjust them, not manipulate them like to deceive, but manipulate them to adjust them to some other format that you want to be seen with the use of Excel. You have a lot more functionality within Excel, and you can do things like saving the reports in a way that can be optimal with the PDF printer into one PDF file so that you can provide it to somebody else in a more efficient way. Now I'm going to be practicing using a Qt PDF printer, which basically acts kind of like a normal printer, but it will save it as a PDF file. I'm not endorsing PDF itself. We don't get paid by the PDF printer, but it's a free option that you can take a look at. There's different kind of PDF printers you can have. I highly recommend having some kind of PDF printer, however, because then you can basically save things as a PDF, even if you do not have the option to do so in the report. So I'm going to practice doing that, and we will use this functionality when we go to the Excel option and then save our Excel worksheet as a PDF. So first, we're going to save it as a PDF, and then we'll export it to Excel, and then we will use Excel to make our one PDF with the 3 files within it. So I'm going to go to the print option here. Now, you could save it as a PDF. I'm going to use the PDF printer to practice doing that, and I think it's useful just to get used to the PDF printer. If you don't have a PDF printer, just save it as a PDF. You can do that as well. The PDF printer, if you have one, then it's going to be right here. Instead of choosing an actual physical printer, we're going to choose the online printer, the PDF printer. It'll print as a digital document, that being a PDF. So I'm going to say save, and then it's going to ask me where do I want to put it. And so it's going to give me a window, and then I lost the window. Here it is. I'm going to go to the desktop. So I'm going to say it's going to be on the desktop. It's going to be in the GGG data files. It's going to be in section 1 through 5. Obviously, you might want it in your client files. I usually put this right under the name so I can then name it. Now, if you have many files in here, you might want to put the date first, but I'm assuming we're putting it into a folder that's just going to include our month-end data, that being for the end of February. You might want to put another folder, obviously. Think about how you're going to group your files within your system if you're printing this stuff out on a monthly basis that you're going to provide to the customer. You might want another folder per month and whatnot. Or if you have all your information in one area, you might actually save it as the year first, then the date, then the month, then the day. So it will sort by year, month, day instead in that format as well. But I'm going to put in balance sheet. So I'm going to say balance sheet, and I'm going to put 02.21 or 28.21. And I'm putting dots instead of dashes because you can't have dashes in a file if you have a Microsoft Office-based computer or a Windows-based computer. You can if you have an Apple computer, or a Mac. So I'm going to maximize this screen. So there's that one. Now we can also save it in Excel. So I'm going to export it to Excel by going to the drop down here. I'm going to create a new worksheet. So I'll create a new worksheet, and then it's going to create a new workbook. Those two terms sound the same. The worksheet is actually the sheets within Excel. You can have multiple tabs. And then the workbook is like the actual document. So if you compare it to Word, the workbook would be the actual document file. The sheets are actually the sheets within it. I'm going to put it into a new workbook. This will actually open up Excel, put a new sheet in Excel, and then transport this data to it. So that's all we need. I'm just going to export it. Clearly, you will need Excel in order to do this. So you have to have Excel in order to export it to Excel. Here it is. I'm going to maximize the screen now. I'm going to do some formatting to it, but before I do, I'm going to save it. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to Save As, and I'm going to Browse. And then I want to put it into that same folder. It's on the desktop. So mine's on the desktop. And then it's under the GGG data files, section 1 through 5. And then I'm going to call this financial statements. We're only looking at balance sheet items here, but we're going to add a whole bunch of other stuff to it. So I'm going to say financial statement. I'll abbreviate it. And then I'm going to say for 02.28.21. And so there it is. Let's put an S. Financial statements, abbreviated, and OK. So I'm going to save it there and say OK. And then I'm going to do some standard formatting. Now there's a split screen up top. So I will go to the second view tab typically to deal with that, to see what it will look like in terms of how many pages it fits on. That's the page layout view. I'm going to say OK. You can see the split screen here. To get rid of that, you go to the View tab up top, Windows Group, and then Split. Remove the split. There it is. I'm going to go back to the normal view down here, normal view, and that looks pretty good. The header you can see is not up top here because the header is in the header section, which you can see in the page layout view. This is how it's going to basically print out, or you'll be able to see the header, in other words, when you print out the report. going back to the normal view, I'm going to go to the first tab. This always prints out every time you have it, every time you export. So I'm going to right click on it, delete it, clicking on the tab, deleting that tab. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to double click on the sheet down below to name it. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to say balance sheet standard. I'll just call it Stan balance sheet. And that's it. I'm going to close it back out. And then the other reports I'm going to save to the same location. So I'm going to close this back out and I'm going to say save it. And then we'll do the same thing for the other reports now. So now I'm going to go back to the report center. Let's going to do another one where we have the, let's do the summary balance sheet now. Let's do the summary. I'm going to run the summary balance sheet. Nice short balance sheet. I'm going to do the same thing now. I'm going to save it as a PDF using the Qt PDF printer. Although you could just simply save as a PDF, this option is not always there if you have like graphs and stuff. So the Qt PDF printer can help you in those circumstances. So I have this. I'm going to say print, and there we have it. Now it's going to ask me where do I want to put it, and I'm going to put my cursor right under the name, and I'm going to call this is a summary balance sheet. Summary balance sheet, and I'm going to save that. And then I'm also going to export it to Excel. Export to Excel. Now it's still going to create a new worksheet because the worksheet is actually within the workbook. So I'm going to create a new worksheet, but it's going to be in the existing workbook, which is going to be the next option that we have. So now I'm going to go to the existing workbook, which is like the Word document. This is the actual document file, the workbook, whereas the worksheet is the sheet within the workbook. So then I'm going to hit the drop down desktop. We want to go to the GGG data and section 1 through 5. And I'm going to call this, oh, that's it. That's what I want. I want this one. That's what I want. And then we'll export it. Now it's going to actually open the last one we exported and then add a new sheet to it and then put this one on the new sheet in the same workbook. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? All right. So there we have it. So now I'm going to pull this sheet to the right. I got the new sheet here. I'm going to grab it, left clicking on it, grab it, pull it to the right. So there we have it. I'm going to double click on it. And this is going to be, I'm going to call it balance sheet summary because it's a summary balance sheet. And then I'm going to go back to the view tab, so I can see where the splits are, see how it prints and see the title. I'm going to say OK. So there's the title. And then I'm going to remove the splits by going to the view tab up top. Go into the Windows group, take off the splits, please. There that is. Let's go back to the normal view. Looks pretty good. I'm going to go back to the first tab because it gave me this thing again, which I don't want. So I'm going to right click on it and delete it and get rid of that thingy dingy. So there we have it. If we go back to this, there it is. So now let's close this back out again. I'm going to close this back out. We'll do this one more time and then we'll see how we can use this to present it to somebody. So there that is. I'm going to now do this one more time, one more report to do this. So we'll go back to the report center, and now we have the comparative balance sheet. Let's run that one. That would be good to give to our clients at the end of each month. That's an impressive looking report. We want to give that to someone. So the date's going to be 2/28/21. Same thing. I'm going to go print that. I'm going to print it to using the Qt PDF printer, which will save it as a PDF, and then we're going to say that's going to be here. I'm going to call this is a comparative balance sheet. So now we have a comparative balance sheet for 02.28.21 and save that. And then let's export it again. We'll export it to Excel too. So I'm going to export it to a new worksheet within the same workbook. So new worksheet here. Next one's going to ask you the workbook. You would think it would be reversed, like they would ask you the workbook and then the worksheet, but no. Worksheet within and now the workbook. So now existing workbook. It's probably going to the right one, but I'm going to double check it because I messed up sometimes. It's kind of frustrating when it goes to the wrong one. And then I'm going to say OK and then export it. And there we have it. So I'm going to maximize this. I'm going to pull this sheet to the right again. I'm just going to grab it and pull it to the right. So there, like that. And then I'm going to go to the first tab and I'm going to right click on it and delete that thing that it just keeps putting there. I don't need that. I don't want it. And then I'm going to double click on this one and say this is a balance sheet comparative. And then let's go to the layout view so we can take a look at the splits. Okay. And we'll go up to the view up top and say, would like you to remove the split. There it is. And the header's there. That looks good. Back to the first tab. So that looks good. So now let's just see what we have in our folder so far and how we can group it and then email it to somebody. So I'm going to close this back out for now. I got my 3 reports. I'm going to say save that, save it. And then let's see what our folder looks like now. If I go into the GGG data folder where we put all this stuff, and then the section 1 through 5. So here's our reports. Now we can provide these reports one at a time. So how can I give this to someone now? Well, I could email with 3 attachments on it, but that can be a little bit, 3 is not too bad, but it'd still be nice if you had less attachments. And we're going to have a lot more than that when we move to the income statement and other supplemental reports. So we could zip it. We could put it into another folder and then zip it. So for example, I could right click on this and say, let's just make another folder, a new folder, and call it financial statements for 02.28.21. And I can put these into that folder. I can drag this in there and say this into that folder and this in there and then this there. And then I can't attach this folder, but I could zip it. Now, even if you zip the folder, if I go into it, there's still kind of an issue because I would like them to read it in order. I'd like them to see this one first because that's the summary, and then possibly this one, and then move to the comprehensive. That's the order I would like them to see it in, and it's in alphabetical order right now. And so they're not going to be able to open it in the order I'd like them to see it if I do it this way, unless I number them. So you could go in here and say, to fix that, you could go in here and say, I want this one to be the number 1 report by renaming it. So I'm going to right click on it. So I've numbered them now by right clicking and renaming them. So that's one way you can deal with that. And then we can go back to the prior one and say, I can't attach this to an email, but if I zip it, then I can attach this to an email. So if I right click on it, and I send it to a compressed file, then I can attach it. So see, now I've compressed the file. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. So if I go to view and make it large with a little zipper, that means it's compressed. That can actually be attached to a email now. Now the other way you might do it is you could send someone the Excel file, but you probably don't want to give an Excel file. It doesn't look as professional unless someone wants it in that type of format. But we can also use Excel then to make one PDF file with the reports on it. And so we can use it kind of to manipulate the PDF files so we have all of the reports on one file. So the way to do that, if I was to open these back up, and then we have our 3 reports here, we can then go to the File tab. We can say, I want to print it, but I'm going to print it using the Qt PDF printer now. And then I want to print not just one sheet, which is typically the default, but rather the entire workbook. So we're going to hit this drop down, say the entire workbook, and then we can print the entire thing. So now we have the balance sheet. We have the end of the balance sheet. Here's the summary. Now I'd probably want the summary to be the second one. So I'm going to go back, and I'd like maybe the summary. I'm going to pull this one to the left. I want the summary and then the standard and then the comprehensive. So they get in this one. They're like, oh, that's not too bad. That's pretty good. And then they start going, oh, that's a lot. More overwhelming, and then here they're going, wow, now it's getting quite detailed on the overwhelming. So we want them to read the first one and then be impressed with the amount of data in the second 2 possibly, and have further use of it, of course. So we're going to go to the reports drop down. We're going to say save or print, and then I want to print the entire workbook. So now we've got the summary sheet, and then we've got the balance sheet, second page of the balance sheet, and then the comparative balance sheet and the second page of that. That looks good. Let's go ahead and print that now. And it's going to print it to the Qt PDF printer once again. So it's going to ask us where do we want to go with it. We're going to have it in the same location. That looks good, and the name looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then I'll minimize this and minimize this. And if I go back into here we got the financial statement. Now I open up this PDF. We can attach this one PDF now to an email, which again, probably the easiest way to send to somebody else so they can open one attachment. So this is one way that you can get all the reports basically on one file here. And so here's our information for those reports on the one PDF file. Note when you do that, you do have like a trade-off between, the formatting a little bit. It's going to be a little bit changed. You saw it to the right a little bit. Here's the summary balance sheet where it's kind of centered more. So you could do some more formatting in Excel if you wanted to center it more and adjust it. You have a lot of options there, but that's going to be like the default setting. And again, a way you can get it all on basically one PDF file. So in other words, if I open this summary one from the zipped file, the formatting will be a little bit different, a little bit more centered with regards to the data, as opposed to if I go to the one that we opened up from the Excel, that we printed out from Excel, then you got the information to the left because it pulled the information basically to the left. You can format Excel and work on centering it and whatnot if you so choose, if you're proficient in Excel. But again, that's kind of the trade-off to getting them all on one page versus multiple PDF files.